Well, chicken dumping is a global phenomenon. We've got very efficient producers of chicken in places like Brazil, the United States, and in Europe. And South Africa had a deal with the United States called AGOA, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. There we go, where we had a deal with the Americans on various products that we produce. So we send South African wine to the United States, and they might buy some of our products. And it also, part of that was to prevent the dumping of foreign chicken on South African shores. The goal of that is to grow the local poultry industry. But you can import chicken into South Africa in many cases cheaper than you can produce it here. So why don't we just capitulate and say, for the sake of South Africans and food inflation, that we stop producing chicken in South Africa and we just import it all, because there's plenty of it about. Why do you keep fighting that fight, Chris?
Well, it's definitely an option. If you look at what's currently happening in South Africa, about 40% of the chicken consumed here is imported. So you could create a job somewhere else and you destroy a job here. So that's a concern, especially if you listen to what our politicians say. The whole campaign around this election was about job creation and economic growth. Those two go hand in hand. Here's a perfect opportunity in the rural areas to stimulate, to do that in our backyard. So we can do it. We've made commitments to government that we will grow the industry and take up the slack. Yet there's trade agreements in place, and we're part of the BRICS community now, although very small. South Africa's part or share on that is only 2%. And we get chicken dumped from Brazil and from the EU from time to time. And it's because of eating habits in those countries. They would prefer the white meat, and then don't know what to do with the brown meat and send it off to us.
So often when you go into a supermarket and you see bags of frozen chicken, it'll be the pieces of the thighs and the drumsticks and the wings, for example. Very often, those won't be locally produced chickens, those will be chickens that are imported. Are people breaking the law with those imports based on the various trade agreements that South Africa has? It seems unlikely, because all of that stuff's got to come through customs and it's got to be cleared into this country.
Well, there's definitely things that we have to subscribe to that doesn't subscribe to importers. One of the things is labeling in line with the Consumer Protection Act is where is it produced? What abattoir, where in the world was this chicken produced for a traceability process? You often will find on the back of a bag of imported chicken that says this might be originating from France, Germany, Belgium, or Chile.
Why is South Africa allowing that chicken in if we're trying to grow an industry domestically?
Well, I think it's about political will. We can produce it here, yet our liberal trade barriers allow people to bring chicken in. I think in the early 90s we were too eager to be everybody's best friend and allow these trade agreements. Now it's 25 years later and it's biting us, and especially the poultry industry, which is currently subsidizing other industries via the AGOA agreement. So we had to give away 8% of our market in order for the auto industry to have benefits in America.
Okay, so for example, at one stage the BMW X3 was manufactured at Roslyn, and we were exporting left-hand drive X3s to the United States, and there are other motive manufacturers. Ford has got a big plant in South Africa. They've invested money. Everything's a trade-off, unfortunately. But you went to Paris. You went to trade discussions with Rob Davies, then the trade minister, and you set in stone the agreements that would govern the way in which chickens would be imported and the way other trade deals would work with our exports to the United States. Do you think the Americans have actually breached that agreement, so much so that you've actually technically sued Donald Trump?
Well, Bruce, one of the parts of the agreement in AGOA was that they can bring 65,000 tons of chicken into this country on an annual basis. And we as a country would keep our benefits in line with the AGOA agreement for exporting products there. Subsequent to that, we believe that some of those benefits have been taken away by the new Trump administration. And in the agreement, there was a clause that says, if we lose the benefit on some of the other trade agreements, this chicken agreement will automatically fall away. And it didn't. So I was integral part of that myself. I just feel we need to go back and say, you've broken the agreement, we're going to pull back our chicken quota. And we approached our Minister of Trade and Industries and said, we are going to institute legal action against whoever is in play. That includes the American president. And we were asked to back off. They will look into it. It's now 6 months later. Nothing has happened, so maybe we'll trigger that event again.
Why is it so absolutely important? Clearly there's a profit motive, and Astral is under financial pressure. Your last result showed the impact of cost increases. The maize harvest wasn't brilliant, and therefore it costs more to feed these chicks, and so your margins have been squeezed domestically. Take me through the rationale of picking a fight with the most powerful economy in the world.
Well, it's not about picking a fight, it's about fair trade. So, if we lose some of our benefit here, they should lose some of their benefit here. We as a country have got very liberal trade barriers, and I think somewhere we just have to stand up to the rest of the world and say the fact that we're a small economy doesn't mean we have to lie down. And every country needs to produce their own food, and food security is essential in Africa. If we're going to become a country of importers, we're going to have a price squeeze, and then the consumer will really suffer.
How many jobs does this industry create in the country? I mean, how many people are employed?
The direct jobs is 120,000. Indirect is much more. You know, we buy grain, we buy soya, we use transporters, packaging. So we are the biggest employer of people in the Department of Agriculture.
Do you see those jobs at risk?
Definitely so. We've seen recently some of our competitors have closed down parts of their farms in the KZN areas on a permanent basis. We are currently in the process of cutting back because of a number of reasons. One of them is the pressure from imports and dumping, and some of the others are based on infrastructural problems.
Well, those infrastructural problems came to the fore, and in recent media reports, and you issued a SENS announcement talking about the risks to the Astral business, particularly in the Lekwa municipality. Now, Astral has got a big business in the Lekwa municipality. You might know it better as Standerton, and it's had issues with water supply. The municipality unable to supply water, so Astral Foods has inserted infrastructure into that town, and has now ended up in a big fight with the municipality there, because the municipality is saying it's not your infrastructure, it's our infrastructure, and we'll determine the water flows. There's been some sabotage in that municipality as well. So much so that it's cost Astral Foods something like 85 million rand. Now that goes directly to the cost of producing food. It goes directly to whether or not a company like Astral should continue to work in a municipality like Lekwa. And it inevitably leads to cutbacks. You cut back, you import more, and industry suffers, and jobs are lost. It seems like an insane virtuous circle, and it is. Why then is Chris Schutte planning to sue brand new President Cyril Ramaphosa? That in a moment.